afternoon, everybody. We are back. This is RAMP, Real Access Motivates Progress live podcast. We're doing them a little bit differently now, and they're going to pop up sporadically, but nonetheless, we have a great show for you today. We are talking Plan RI, and I can't wait to introduce you to my guest, John Susa, who is going to tell you all about what Plan RI is all about. So let's welcome John to the show. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm great, Tina. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm kind of excited.
Well, let's get started and let's tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay. So, who am I? So, I am a parent of two sons with significant disabilities. One of my sons was born with these disabilities, and it was fairly obvious early on in life. The other one developed juvenile rheumatoid arthritis as a 6-year-old, and it became a crippling disease that has kind of wrecked his life and still dogs him today. Both of these guys are now in their 40s. Mark, my youngest, is 47, and Frank, his brother, has now actually just turned 50. So early on in life, my wife and I decided we really needed to become very aware of the future, because the first thing that went through our minds as we became aware of their unique needs was the question, what will happen to these two guys once we are no longer able to help them? We're primarily because we're gone. And as we started looking around for the answer, it's been an almost 40, 50-year search to that answer. The first thing that I learned is that every parent that I have ever met who has a son or daughter with a disability, whether they're a newborn or they're a 40 or 50-year-old, is asking the same question. So Connie and I started looking for the answer, and we discovered that parents all over the world are trying to answer that question in their own unique way. And there are some people in the world who have come up with an answer. And as I looked at that answer and looked for finding an answer to that question locally, I couldn't really find anything. So we went international, and we discovered a group in Canada, British Columbia, in Vancouver, British Columbia, who had formed an organization called Plan Canada. And Plan Canada was now online and was saying, we have a partial answer to this question. We contacted them, we were able to interact with them, and they helped us understand some really important realities that we really had not thought of ourselves. So after this knowledge and after this contact, we started talking to families here in Rhode Island, telling them what we had learned, telling them what they were doing in Canada and other parts of the world. And a group of us, about 6 families, got together and said, let's see if we can create an organization like they have in Canada. We named it Personal Lifetime Advocacy Networks of Rhode Island, because that name kind of summarizes the heart and soul of Plan Rhode Island. What do parents do? Parents are the advocates for their children, especially their children who can't speak for themselves, especially children who can't figure out what's going on in the world because it's more complicated than they're able to understand at the moment. So the parents are their advocates. And when we parents think about the future, what we're really thinking about is who will advocate for my son or daughter when I'm gone? And right away, parents think, well, of course, his brothers or sisters or her brothers or sisters. Well, that's great if you have a large family. It's great if you have a family that doesn't move from hometown. It's great if the brothers and sisters are able, both financially, emotionally, or whatever way you can think of, to be able to do that. But not every family has siblings that can do that. And so many families find themselves in the predicament of still trying to solve the problem. Who will advocate for my son or daughter when I'm gone? The answer,
So is that what Plan RI is all about? Is planning for the future for your children?
absolutely, absolutely. It's all about planning for the future, especially when we're gone. And so the the solution that Plan Canada started working on developing an approach was divided into three areas. Some of them we're all very familiar with. So the first thing is parents are told almost from the time they're told that they have a child with a disability that you need to make sure that you protect your son or daughter's eligibility for very expensive services that are often paid for by the government. Medicaid paid for services, uh, habilitation services, all those kinds of therapeutic services. They're all means tested. And if you don't have the right insurance or you don't have enough of that insurance, then a family is in crisis financially. So being eligible for these government paid for services is very important to almost every family I know. Even families who have, who are middle class income families who have substantial amounts of income, um, they're facing over a lifetime multi-million dollars worth of expenses to help care for their son or daughter, both in health care, in supportive care, in durable medical equipment costs. And there are very few families that can afford to do that on their own. So they need help in making sure that their son or daughter is eligible for support. But even on top of that, there are some things that the government does not provide. It doesn't provide for a lot of things that some people would call luxuries, some people would call fun things. And even with the advent of things like some of the more recent, more forward thinking uh, approaches that allow people to save money, a lot of families want to put away some money in their estate planning to be able to make sure that some of the fun things that their sons or daughters may enjoy that government would not normally pay for could be paid for through some smart estate planning. And so we help and we encourage people to do that. We don't do that ourselves. We're not a financial advising agency. We're a parent-driven organization that says we know what your life is like. We're living it, and here's what we've learned, and here's what we think you ought to do. And so one of the things that we say to families is make sure you go out and find competent professional advice to help you set up the kind of financial and estate planning you need. Here are some attorneys that we know in Rhode Island that are experts in this area. Here are some financial planners who know what your concerns are. So we say to families, do that. The next thing we say to families is, sometimes, of course, we do this all simultaneously, but the next thing we do is we say, who is going to be the person that is going to help your son or daughter make decisions about very complicated things, like their future life, like their personal support plans, like finding help. Way too often in America, we think that that should be done by a guardian. And lots of parents are encouraged to get guardians for their sons or daughters. There are some people who might need to have a guardian, but not the majority of people with disabilities. And so we are allied with groups of organizations, legal and other advocacy organizations, that are saying to families, be careful about your thinking about how to help your son or daughter make decisions. First, try to help your son or daughter learn how to make decisions on their own. Our default is always assume competence. Our default is always let your son or daughter control their own life. Don't you, don't you?
As easy as that sounds, it's people don't get that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's something that definitely has to happen.
absolutely. And it has to happen, it has to start really young. It has to happen, especially people with cognitive and intellectual disabilities or emotionally based disabilities. They often, as children, live an extremely sheltered and actually not very normal, typical life. And so they don't have the foundational experiences that they need to have to, as adults, make good decisions.
Right.
Now, some people will go through life and not be able to master that, all of it, completely. So we help people recognize that, well, if your son or daughter is known by some important people that he or she trusts, then those people are good people to be able to turn to. If your son or daughter knows a bunch of people, he or she doesn't always have to go to the same person for advice on making a decision. And so we're big advocates for what's now known as supported decision making. This idea that son or daughter, an individual with a disability, anybody actually, can set up a system of getting advisors. I have, I have an insurance agent. That's my insurance advisor. When I was buying a house, I went to a real estate agent. That's my real estate advisor. I don't have one, but I might have a tax advisor. I may have all kinds of advisors, and I go to them. If you haven't, if you have a guardian, you can only go to the guardian, and that guardian is not an expert in many things. And so, this idea of supported decision making provides a much more holistic, much more complete collection of expert advisors to help our sons get the advice and decision making help that they need. Now, those people don't make decisions for my
So
kids.
how do you find the guardians if it's not family members? How do you find the guardians for your children that will work best for your children to build that bond prior to something happening to you?
Okay, so that's the third element of plan. There's been tons of research that's been done all over the world looking at, how do you set up life so that your son or daughter has the best life possible? In Canada, Mansky, the founder of Plan Canada, talks about looking at the predictors of a safe and secure future. And the predictors are actually obvious. The best predictors of a safe and secure future is actually the number of people that know my boys, know their life, know their history, have things in common with them, and who have a desire and an interest to have long-term friendships and relationships with them. You have friends. I have friends. Some of those friends are short-term. Some of them are very long-term. Our friendships are based on common experiences, common geography. We develop friends with people that we spend time with, that we live next to or live around. And they're people that we have common interests with. Everybody has those people around them. Often everybody but people with disabilities. The problem that people with disabilities face is the people around them are paid to be around them. They're paid to be their caretakers. They're paid to be their advisors. They're paid to be the whatever they are. But all paid relationships, I shouldn't say all, most paid relationships end when the payment ends. So the idea of looking for people to become connected to an individual with a disability is kind of a new paradigm. The paradigm is based on those three core concepts,
I can imagine that's a very hard thing to find somebody who wants to take care of somebody else's kids with disabilities for the long term.
Actually, it's not, because the taking care of, those are good words that you use, but because they describe something. They describe the service system. The service system takes care of kids with disabilities. The service system does not befriend people with disabilities. I don't know a lot about you, but I do know that you're a very active person who has a network of people that is around you because you do things in common, because you have experiences in common, and because they like doing stuff for you and with you. They don't do it just for you. They do it because they like to do it too. And so it's not that difficult when you approach the thinking of a network as a collection of people with disability and without, living common integrated lives. Now, that's not easy, as you know, because most people with disabilities don't live integrated lives. They live in specialized living environments. They go to specialized schools. Or if they're not in specialized schools, they're in specialized classrooms. When they work, they often work in an environment that's separate from the rest of the workforce. Only recently in Rhode Island are we seeing a real movement towards getting people with disabilities to be integrated into the workforce. Work is great. It gets you money, but work is even better at helping people find friends, taking those coworkers and making them into friends. We're not recruiting people to be caregivers or caretakers. We're recruiting people to become friends. Now, friends can come from a lot of different places. They can come from next door. They can come from the kids that you went to school with. They can come from the people you work with. They can come from the people in your club, whatever your club is. If you're a shell collector and there's a shell collector club, you've got the potential of getting a friend in that club. Friends are people that have been in our past lives that we've maybe lost contact with. So that's the goal, to find friends, to find people who, as friends, can now become helpers in decision making.
How successful has Plan RI been with putting people with new friends for the long haul?
So we don't normally look for new friends first. We actually start with old friends first. We Plan has been around for about 20 years, and we have helped about 25, 30 families create these things that we call personal support networks. In Canada, England, other parts of the world, these plan organizations have been in existence for a little bit longer, and sometimes a lot longer. And they have been extremely successful. This is one of the paradoxes of Plan Rhode Island. We are the longest existing plan-like organization in the United States. Other parent groups have attempted to do the same thing in Seattle, Washington, in Boston, in Colorado, in Chicago, all over the country. And it's been extremely difficult to maintain the existence of the plan organizations. Nobody has ever looked at, are there these personal support networks in existence outside of an organization like Plan Rhode Island? But we in Plan Rhode Island know that we have had people join Plan, we have helped them create a network, and then they have basically said, you know what, we think we can do this on our own now that we know what we're doing. And they do, because you don't need an organization to kind of help families and individuals develop relationships. You know, I'm sure most of your relationships are not managed by an organization or an agency. They become natural and normal.
So do you go out and about in the community and have events where you can kind of put everybody together? Is that the gist, or how do people get involved?
No. So let me describe what typically happens. So a family learns about us. They come to us, and we have like kind of an informational exchange. Takes maybe a year for that to happen, because we really want to help the family look at this whole issue as broadly as possible. We'll give them kind of our entry guide, and it has about 25 critical questions. Some of the questions are questions like, describe your family, your core family, your and then your extended family. Where do they live? How much time do you spend with them? We ask them to think about, where have you lived? Who do you know from where you have lived in the past? Of all of the caregivers that your son or daughter has had, and many families will say those run into the dozens or many dozens. Are there any of those people who your son or daughter had a particular affinity for? And are any of those people potentially people who have an affinity for your son or daughter that if we reached out to them might be interested in being reconnected? After a while, we develop a list of potential members of the network. These are all people that already know the individual with the disability. They also already know the family, some more or less, but who have not ever been invited to have a relationship again. Because as you know, in the disability world, particularly in the disability world that's funded by Medicaid, there's a lot of concern about people developing relationships with paid caregivers.
Right.
They're not allowed to. Okay.
So how do people get involved in Plan RI? How do they contact you? How do they get part of the program?
Okay. So the first thing they can do is they can go to our website, planri.org. That describes a lot about Plan. It describes what we do. It describes our core values of community and inclusion. And excuse me, it describes a role, a role for somebody that we call a facilitator. When people join Plan, we help them do some thinking and planning and identifying who might be part of the network. Then we help find somebody whose job it is to help the family recruit and maintain their network. You know, my experience, and I think the experience of many parents, is it's fairly easy to go and ask a friend, a neighbor, can you help me here? Can you help Mark do this or do that? And people are very happy to do so. Sometimes people will say sure, and then they actually don't really want to do it, but
Right.
they don't want to say that to me.
It sounds like an absolutely amazing program, putting people together to take care of or to help out or be friends with somebody down the road. We're nearing the end of the podcast. If you had to sum up Plan Rhode Island in a minute, what would you say? Why should people get involved with Plan RI?
Well, the reason they should get involved is because parents are worried about their son and their daughter's future after parents are gone. The only security that people have, whether they have a disability or not, really comes from the number of people that are their friends and their associates and their family members. And it's important that those relationships get strengthened. Plan Rhode Island helps find those people, helps strengthen those relationships, and then helps assure that those relationships become long-term. No network of people, no friendship can always last forever. So part of what Plan does is that it constantly is working towards renewing the network, finding new people to add to it, replacing people who move away. And what Plan also tries to do is to make sure that these networks are functioning the best way that they can possibly do so. So
that's amazing. What you do
do.
with Plan RI is truly amazing and helping out all the families you do. I can't thank you enough for coming on today and sharing all about Plan RI. And I plan on having you back for some updates letting me know what's going on. But give us the website one more time so people
Okay,
can get
so-
involved.
Sure. It's planri.org, www.planri.org. Don't get confused. There are other plan organizations out there, but if you go to planri.org, you will get to us. And then from there, you can contact us by, email or whatever, and you can learn a lot about what we do. Now, we do not see Plan RI as the only organization that can do this. I'm a big advocate. We're a big advocate for saying to people, everybody with a disability needs to have a network. They don't all have to be Plan RI networks. And
Right.
we're happy to share and help encourage people to be able to do this. But no matter what, when parents are gone, unless somebody has figured out how to do Zoom from 6 feet underground, this is the next best thing to it.
It's wonderful. So go to planri.org and contact John. Thank you so much, John, for joining us today. I really appreciate you sharing what you do, and I look forward to working with you going forward.
Great. I appreciate your inviting me here, and I'm looking forward to working with you too.
Everybody, we will see you soon, so stay tuned for when we pop up again. And as I always say, don't just sit there, make a difference.
Great.